It's soft as a misty rain that gently touches my soul. It cools the fire that burns in me, and I simply lose control. So just rain down on me. Let your love just fall like raindrops.
You were a deadbeat the day my sister married you, and you still a deadbeat today.
Listen, Esther, now you know good and well the day I married your sister, I was loaded.
Yeah, you was loaded all right. You were so drunk you fell on the preacher.
But I had to get drunk to look at your ugly family.
Don't you talk about my family.
I'll talk about your family. Listen, for years people going around saying, black is beautiful. They took one look at your family and said, hold everything.
Hello everyone, it is Books&Looks TV. Today I will be discussing the mockery of Black women in comedy. I would like to acknowledge that I am not merely talking about Black men in dresses, which is usually the theme of this conversation, or the theme of Black males' conversation of emasculation. My point is mostly about how Black women are usually the center of jokes and mockery, and also how Black women contribute to those jokes. And I'll also describe beauty standards and colorism and how that plays a part of the entirety. And so I think it's very important to explain a few definitions. The first definition I'll talk about is emasculate. So emasculate is a verb. It means to deprive a man of his male role or identity. Mockery is teasing and contemptuous language or behavior directed at a particular person or thing. Again, I would like to mention that in this conversation of men in dresses, heterosexual Black men's concern is often that they are emasculated, whereas Black women's concern is that we are mocked. So in a sense, when Black men see Black male comedians in dresses or acting as a woman, they feel that they are being ridiculed in Hollywood and that there isn't a good image of Black men. Whereas most Black women don't see it as femininity of Black women in general. And what's problematic about this is that it's seen as funny and profitable. And most of the comedians who perpetuate this are often dark-skinned Black men. So hence, when they act in this way, dark-skinned Black women are often correlated with this type of behavior. So there are numerous of comedians who have contributed to this and made a great livelihood off of this, whether it be opportunities in film, television, and just becoming independent in their own industries. And so I have pretty much divided this video essay into two sections for old school comedians versus new school comedians. And then the last section will talk about my own observations and the conclusion. So I'm just going to go over the overview of this video essay. For the old school comedians, I'll be discussing Richard Pryor, Red Fox, Eddie Murphy, Jamie Foxx, Martin Lawrence, Nick Cannon, and Kenan Thompson, and Tyler Perry. I know that calling some of these comedians old school could be debatable, but basically the people in the old school category are anyone who was prevalent before the year 2000. And my new school section will be the comedians of Dave Chappelle, Watermelondria, also known as Trey Melvin from YouTube, the Hudson Brothers, and the character TT. And these comedians have often been those who relied heavily on a comedy network and or YouTube to start their careers or excel in their careers. Lastly, I will be talking about my own observations of the mockery of black women in comedy. They include part one, black women and accountability, part two, beauty standards and jokes, and part three, Tremo. And then I will conclude on my video essay. So again, the first section that I'm going to go into is about old school comedians. The first comedian I will address is Richard Pryor. Many of you may know Richard Pryor as an OG comedian. He was probably the first black comedian to be honest about racial issues and say derogatory slurs towards white people, among white people on stage. And he just is known for being brutally honest. Richard Pryor became successful as an onstage comedian, and he then ventured into various comedy movies. There's this one very interesting movie called JoJo Dancer, Your Life is Calling. In that movie, he depicts a comedian who's trying to make it in the industry, and he has to make really tough decisions on how to make it. There's a scene of him pretty much in drag where he wears makeup and eventually wears a dress. And again, I would like to say that I am not this video meant to be homophobic or again rely on the emasculation narrative. I'm just talking about in general how black men mock black women in their behavior. So Richard Pryor, to my knowledge, doesn't mock black women, but he is the first to open up their door of being a black man who dresses in drag. And from that point on, you will start seeing more ridicule of black women and black men just being open to mocking black women or wearing dresses or makeup. So the second person I like to acknowledge is Red Fox. Red Fox was also a popular comedian in that time. He had a show called Sanford and Son, and he would often ridicule a character named Esther. They would go back and forth actually and bickering, but one of his biggest jokes was always her physical appearance. Don't get me wrong, Esther, again, she would stand on her own, but I did notice that she would be a dark skinned black woman and she would often over exaggerate what it meant to be ugly, even like cocking her eye or twisting her face to make herself seem more physically unattractive. And I'm just going to play some clips for you all.
Hello, Woody.
I say hello too, Fred.
You did?
Yes, I did.
Look here. Woody, you keep an eye on her, and I'll call the zoo and tell them you captured a baboon that looks like a parrot.
Fred, now you're speaking about the woman I love.
I am?
Yes. I love this woman with all my heart and all my mind and all my soul.
Good. Well, you be all right as long as you don't use your eyes.
Watch it, sucker. You're getting on my nerve.
It would take Muhammad Ali, Rosie Greer, with an assist from King Kong to get me on any part of you.
That did it.
That's right. Ow! Ow! Ow!
Fred?
Lord have mercy, what have I done?
This is it.
Woodrow.
I got the two big ones, one in my head and one in my heart. Oh, Elizabeth, I'm coming, honey. Have a heart and a head man ready.
Oh, Lord have mercy, what have I done? Woodrow, what must we do?
Wipe off all the fingerprints and get the heck out of here.
No, we got to save this sinner. Even the Lord lowest creature deserves pity.
All right, I'll call a doctor.
Even this heathen deserves to live.
Start to give him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation.
I'd rather wipe the fingerprints off.
And so Esther, whose real name is LaWanda Page, again was a very substantial character in Sanford and Son. And I want you to remember her name because I'm going to bring her up again pretty soon, and how people often will ridicule dark-skinned black women and or comedians. So next though, I'll talk about Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy was a very popular comedian in the 90s, and he starred in this movie called Harlem Nights with other prominent black male comedians. There's a scene though where he bickers with a light-skinned black woman. At this time, it's actually one of the earliest times where you see a black woman also get ridiculed. And I think her size played a huge part of her being ridiculed and masculinized. So in this part of the movie, they basically get into a fight over the politics of the club. And Della Reese basically challenges him and or wants to be heard, and they end up in a physical altercation. In fact, I believe Eddie Murphy cursed her out, but I'm not too sure about that. I just know generally they get into an altercation.
Because the bar and the crap table never come up short, just the girls.
Now calm down, Vera.
Kiss my ass, sugar. I want to know what it is Quick is trying to say.
I ain't trying to say shit. You in charge of the girls, right?
I am in charge of the girls.
Are you in charge of the girls?
I am in charge of the girls.
Okay, the girls are always coming up short. All right, let's get the shit out in the open. The girls are always coming up short. Even when the place is packed, the girls come up short. Now, either you or them got a problem with their arithmetic.
Are you saying I'm stealing?
And Eddie Murphy, he was pretty much getting beat on. Like he was losing the fight. So Eddie Murphy did something that I thought was even more crazy. Once he began to lose the fight, he pulled out a gun. And there's this like popular scene, the fight and him pulling out the gun, because what he does next is pretty unimaginable. He shoots her in her pinky toe, and she pretty much screams out, I got shot in my pinky toe. And the men who were in the club, they're just watching it and they're just laughing like, I can't believe this guy did that. But nobody pretty much reprimands him. And this scene also reminds me of a few things. First, it reminds me of how shameless and egotistical men can be to even fight a woman, let alone pull a gun out on her. But it also reminds me of the recent Megan Thee Stallion um, crime where Tory Lanez pulls out a gun on her and shoots her in the foot, and how people ridiculed her, 50 Cent being one of them, making memes about her, and people just pretty much not humanizing her. And so, again, I know people saw that scene as funny, but I just was like, dang, like, why is this grown man fighting a woman? And again, I really believe it's because she was a bigger woman. Oftentimes, people will say that, oh, bigger women are strong, or, they just don't see them as feminine as someone who probably was light skinned and slim. So aside from this, Eddie Murphy continues to portray this type of, you know, um, I guess you could say ridiculing black women. So in The Nutty Professor, he has multiple characters, and he also embodies this black woman who's kind of over exaggerated, is like loud and happy and emotional. And she just does like things that I feel are unnecessary. But again, it's to like overcompensate something. And then probably the next more ridiculous character was him playing Respucia. So in the movie Norbit, Respucia happens to be like this overweight black girl, and Norbit is this nerd who's always getting bullied. And she pretty much saves him from being bullied. And it seems to be like this weird love connection where he pretty much submits to her as like this savior, but he's also not really in love with her, and he's basically fearful of her. But again, he can't tell her like I'm not in love with you, whatever. So throughout the movie, you see them together, but he seems very miserable. And this character is very loud and very, I guess you could say, arrogant or proud. She does these things that a lot of bigger women don't necessarily do, especially during that time. Like she wears this really revealing swimsuit that some would say doesn't complement her shape, and she's just always really controlling of Norbit. I know some people will say, well, this happens in real life, particularly women being dominating, but I don't like how they pictured like people deciding to love someone they don't find desirable, whether it be like emotionally or physically. But again, they portray a dark skinned, overweight black woman as this like very vile character. And Eddie Murphy, again, he doesn't mind stepping into these roles where he disrespects black women. The next the next comedians I'll address are Nick Cannon and Kenan Thompson. So there was a show in the 90s on Nickelodeon called All That. And this show was kind of like a teenage improvised show or sketch show where they would pretty much just, do different scenarios that were funny. And so this one scene Nick Cannon and Kenan Thompson did was a scene where they were like working in this convenience store and they were supposed to be like these loud ghetto black women. And it's ironic that even at such a young age that these boys realize that they could embody this and be seen, and it could be seen as funny or profitable.
Girl, I love working here.
Girl, there's nothing I can think that I'd rather be doing than working right here quick and fast.
Okay,
Hold on, Natalia, hold on.
thank you, Lanisha.
Here you go, TT. There you go.
Ladies, can one of you help me, please?
No, Lanisha, let me help.
See, I don't care who helps me. Can one of you guys just get me 3 of those hot dogs, please?
Oh, yes, Your Majesty, I live to serve.
I would help you, but I don't want to.
Here you go, Your Highness. That's 3 hot dogs. That'll be a whole quarter.
Wow, what a great deal. 3 hot dogs for a quarter?
How exciting.
And so, again, this is something that Nick Cannon and Kenan Thompson did in their early career. And as time went on, Kenan Thompson and Nick Cannon were able to venture more in the comedic world. You don't really see them portraying it as they got older into their career, but that is something they did and something that some people will find offensive. So remember I told you to remember Esther and or LaWanda Page? So Jamie Foxx played in Living Color. A lot of people love this show again for its comedy and sketches. And Jamie Foxx at the time played this character named Ugly Wanda. What was so saddening to me about this role was that, again, it attacked the idea of a dark-skinned, stereotypical black woman, but it also personally attacked LaWanda Page because, again, LaWanda Page was her real name. Esther was her character. So he basically, carried the name of Ugly Wanda. So to me, it's like he was calling her ugly, which some people could say, oh, he had no control over, but he did decide to play that role. And I think, again, that it was offensive regardless of who was responsible. But again, I'll show you in the next clip. Ugly Wanda, the character of Ugly Wanda was pretty much overbearing and supposed to be like this ghetto black woman.
At last, I have found my prey.
Gary Coleman, you better stop. Gary? Oh, it's cold in here. I'm feeling goose nippy.
By the depths of Hades, what is that smell?
Dog, I gotta quit eating them pig's feet. My gas is kicking out.
Next up is Martin Lawrence as Shanae or Shanae Jenkins. Now, I'm sure a lot of you probably have seen the show Martin, and Shanae was one of the popular characters that he played. So he played like different characters. But again, the only female character that I can remember is Shanae. And Shanae happened to be the next door neighbor who was like in love with Martin, but it's like she would never tell him. But anyway, she was like super aggressive and loud, and Gina and Pam tried to avoid her because she was always like on some.
What do you want, Shanae?
Oh my goodness. If it isn't Little Miss Attitude, why are you always over here? I mean, don't you have a bag?
Look, I don't have time to play games with you, okay?
Hey, but ain't nobody playing no games, all right? Ain't nobody playing no games, all right? All I want to know is why Martin had a party and didn't invite me. I mean, I like the party, all right? Did I like the party, all right? Did I like the party?
There isn't a party, Shanae. We're just watching a fight together.
Oh, well, I likes me a good fight. I mean, you should know that. Okay? You don't put your hands on me. You don't touch me. Okay? Because ain't nobody here to break us up, all right? Huh? Ring, come on with it.
Whatever, Shanae. But there'll be a $10 cover charge.
$10?
$10.
$10? Oh, my goodness. I thought Martin was paid. That is so cheap. Just like them little run-over shoes you got on. Ooh. That's right, you better run.
And so in the show, it shows a stereotypical black woman. She happens to be a cosmetologist, which is nothing wrong with being a cosmetologist. But again, I feel like they tried to demonize that in correlation with like black womanhood. There's a scene where she's also like working in a beauty shop and she's messing up people's head and she's like talking bad about the characters. So it just seems like everything related to Shanae's character is supposed to be wrong and overbearing, and she can't keep a man, quote unquote. Martin Lawrence would also be criticized, or the show would be criticized, because Martin would often make fun of Pam, who happened to be like the dark skinned main character on the show. She was Gina's best friend, but he would always crack jokes, whether it be her hair, calling like her kinks beady bead, or just saying her breath stank, or just, saying something crazy. And I know that this trope is common, like where the guy doesn't get along with the best friend, but the things he said, again, was rooted in colorism. And a lot of people felt it was uncalled for. A lot of people will acknowledge that Tashina Arnold is a very beautiful woman. In her younger years, too, she was very beautiful. And honestly, compared to Gina, I feel like she dressed better than Gina and had a better personality. And it's not to say that Gina wasn't beautiful, but it's just like because she was lighter skinned, she was often praised, while Tashina Arnold was the butt of many jokes. And I know that this trope is common, like where the guy doesn't get along with the best friend, but the things he said, again, was rooted in colorism. And a lot of people felt it was uncalled for. A lot of people will acknowledge that Tashina Arnold is a very beautiful woman. In her younger years, too, she was very beautiful. And honestly, compared to Gina, I feel like she dressed better than Gina and had a better personality. And it's not to say that Gina wasn't beautiful, but it's just like because she was lighter skinned, she was often praised, while Tashina Arnold was the butt of many jokes. Last but not least, in the old school category, I'll talk about Tyler Perry. So Tyler Perry pretty much started off with plays, and he kind of has his rags to riches story. His main character was Medea. Medea pretty much was his cash cow, and Medea embodied a matriarchal character of like black womanhood. And he started off with like Christian plays again and all of that. But when those plays start to pick up and people love the character, he went into like this whole movies of Medea goes to jail, Medea's class reunion, et cetera, where Medea would be featured in films or he would play himself and play Medea. And again, a lot of black people loved it, but a lot of people hated the stereotypes, not only of his like production and writing, but some people felt very uneasy how he would always be like this loud, obnoxious, older black woman. But sometimes people overlooked it because he became so successful and he hired like many black people, and he probably was the most successful black man who made a mockery off of black womanhood. Like right now, he's a billionaire. So that pretty much sums up the old school comedians who participated in the mockery of the black woman, and those are comedians who pretty much reigned in that character 2000 and before. And so now we're going to go to the post era or current era, and I will be discussing Dave Chappelle, the Hudson Brothers, and TT. So first, I like to start off with Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle did start his comedy career in the 90s, but in the mid 2000s, he was at his peak in his career. He had this show called The Chappelle Show where he had skits, and it was pretty funny to a lot of his skits were pretty funny. He played different characters, different races of people, and it was a quite successful show. However, there was a rumor and a challenge that Dave Chappelle had. He pretty much was offered $60 million as reported to wear a dress, and Dave Chappelle declined that. Dave Chappelle told Oprah Winfrey in an interview that he felt some type of social responsibility and that he felt like he was being socially irresponsible, to paraphrase what he said. So, again, at that time, a lot of people were stunned because a lot of people thought it was a lot of money and he was so successful. But it began to raise eyebrows. And of course, a lot of critics, especially black men, would say, oh, well, this is a problem. But again, it wasn't because it was necessarily mocking black women. It's because they felt like it was destroying their idea of masculinity or black masculinity. So Dave Chappelle did go on a hiatus, and a lot of people do praise him and say, well, Dave Chappelle never wore a dress. He had integrity. But actually, Dave Chappelle did wear a dress before. There's this there's this movie called Robin in the Hood where he dresses up as like a medieval character in Europe, and he even wears like a wig or weave. And I think that some people either don't know it or overlook it because the dress wasn't very modern. It was loose fitting, and some people would even argue that men in those days wore dresses. But nonetheless, he wore a dress before. But maybe had some type of consciousness again to why he didn't wear a dress, or as he said, he felt a lot of people thought it was a lot of money and he was so successful. But it began to raise eyebrows. And of course, a lot of critics, especially black men, would say, oh, well, this is a problem. But again, it wasn't because it was necessarily mocking black women. It's because they felt like it was destroying their idea of masculinity or black masculinity. So Dave Chappelle did go on a hiatus, and a lot of people do praise him and say, well, Dave Chappelle never wore a dress. He had integrity. But actually, Dave Chappelle did wear a dress before. There's this movie called Robin in the Hood where he dresses up as like a medieval character in Europe, and he even wears like a wig or weave. And I think that some people either don't know it or overlook it because the dress wasn't very modern. It was loose fitting, and some people would even argue that men in those days wore dresses. But nonetheless, he wore a dress before. But maybe he had some type of consciousness again to why he didn't wear a dress, or as he said, he felt he was being irresponsible. And so with Watermelondria or Trey Melvin in like maybe mid 2000s, around 2012, 2013, he was on YouTube and he came out with this character. And what's so ironic and ridiculous is that it literally has the name Watermelon in the female character's name, and then it's Drea. So, a lot of people may know that watermelon has been a joke used since Jim Crow to make fun of black people. They say, oh, well, these black people have these big lips and they love watermelon and they're so stupid. Just a whole bunch of like comics around it. And to me, there's nothing wrong with liking watermelon. But the fact he chose that name just shows how desperate to me he was to like portray some type of quote unquote ghetto character. And so Trey Melvin would become like a big YouTuber, and I believe he got into other ventures. But aside from that, became the Hudson brothers. The Hudson brothers consist of Emmanuel and Philip Hudson. And to me, they are naturally funny. They don't have to dress up as women. But again, that's something that they chose to do. And one of their most biggest skits was the Ratchet Girl anthem. And there are times where they don't dress up as women to put on this persona, but there are other times they do or they did. And what's even crazier to me is that they were on a national television show, a national talent show, and they decided that it would be funny to bring those characters to the big screen or again a national platform. And so as they approach the stage, a lot of the judges are like shocked because they're like, you look very ridiculous. What are you doing? But there's like this woman of color, and I want to say she's probably a mixed black woman, and she's just kind of like egging them on and laughing. And it's just like they're relying on her to kind of make the others feel comfortable. But again, if you've seen other skits by Emmanuel and Philip Hudson, you would know that they are funny and they don't have to do this again, but they chose to do this. But what's ironic is that Emmanuel ends up going on Wild and Out, which is also a comedy show, a comedy skit show that was created by Nick Cannon, who also played a black woman. So again, you see like there's this pattern and doors opening up as they choose to do these type of roles. And last but not least, I'm going to talk about the character TT. So last but not least is Quaylon Rogers. Quaylon Rogers also plays the character of TT. And in this character, he's usually wearing some like bright, loud lipstick and wigs. And generally, there's nothing wrong for black women doing it. But again, he tries to portray and become quote unquote successful. But anyway, Quaylon Rogers has used his profits to pretty much start a restaurant and other ventures and pretty much flip his own money. And he also got like a collaboration with Tyler Perry. So, he's supposed to, so both of them, they do like the same thing, the character trope of black women. So them working together isn't really much a surprise. But again, it just kind of seems unnecessary after a while. And so now I'm going to go towards the end of my video essay where I talk about like some other observations I've known in this aspect. And the first one is black women and accountability. But I thought it would be very important to realize the role that black women can play in this comedic world, whether it's like internalizing misogyny or, pretty much ridiculing other women. And so the first person I'd like to talk about is Kim Wayans. You all probably know Kim Wayans as like the sister of the Wayans brother, that family who's full of talent and who pretty much reigned in the 90s and put each other on. And so Kim Wayans played In Living Color, and she pretty much ridiculed Oprah Winfrey. And she dressed up with like, I guess you could say balloons or like some oversized garbage bags or whatever to make herself seem fat and clumsy. And like every little intricacy about Oprah Winfrey, she depicted in her skit to make Oprah Winfrey look ridiculous. But what's interesting is Oprah Winfrey invited the Wayans on her show for an interview, and Oprah Winfrey admitted how, seeing not only Kim but also her brothers mimic her weight and just make fun of her in general made her feel really saddened. And Kim was the first to like become really serious and empathetic. And she said, being the person I am today, I would have never done that. And I feel really responsible. And I'm sorry that I made you feel that way. And ironically, her brothers just laughed it off and said, oh, well, you're fine now. So it seems like when it comes to Black women being accountable, a lot of times they will step back and realize, okay, what I did was wrong, or, am I being socially responsible? Another example I can think of is a mixed Black woman by the name of Angela Means. Angela Means played Felicia off Friday. And in her character, she was pretty much a drug addict who would ask to borrow things and who just wandered the neighborhood looking pretty wretched. And often people would see her in the movie and they would just say, oh, she's a junkie and laugh. And, whatever Craig and Smokey or Ice Cube and Chris Tucker said about her was justifiable because pretty much no one valued her. And she was also in an abusive relationship with Debo. And so Angela Means addressed in an interview how playing that role really made her feel bad. Like she said in general, she was thinking about how no one valued her as a character because she was a drug addict. And she was just thinking about in general how women were portrayed in domestic relationships, etc. And I'll just let you hear what she had to say.
We just kind of let Felicia fall through the cracks. We're responsible for ourselves, but she had been like that a long time. It didn't just happen. She was like that. So what happened to Felicia? Why didn't anyone get upset when she showed up beat up? Why? Because she's and you saw she didn't steal any money.
Right.
You know why she was going to get that microwave? You know who she was cooking chicken for? You know why she was going to get the car? You know who she was going to get something for?
Right.
She had to go drive and do an errand for her man. She was so loyal to her man to the point where and did you see at the end of the film who was there when he was knocked out? Who was standing right by his side? And she didn't get any points for that. She was trying to help him as much as she needed help, as much as Felicia needed help. She was standing by this bully who was bullied.
So yeah, you basically heard how she said that in the movie, actually, Felicia's intention for even asking to borrow things was so that Debo wouldn't break into their house. So she became very emotionally attached to the character, and she said that she would no longer play that role, if it was when they asked, when they were proposing a future next Friday where they were trying to bring in the old characters, she said she didn't want to be a part of that because she didn't like how they dehumanized a woman. And so again, there comes a little small conversation. Oh, is this a biracial woman? Is this a Black woman? But I think is in general, it's interesting that no one thought about the race of her specifically because she was in a Black neighborhood and what she was doing was seen as morally wrong. And sometimes people automatically associate that to Blackness. So some people talk about beauty standards. So when it comes to beauty standards, if you meet the criteria of what it means to be beautiful and someone cracks a joke, it's really not a big thing because you are the standard of beauty. And then sometimes people won't even crack jokes towards you because they admire you. But when you see someone who isn't really considered desirable, like Azealia Banks, who happens to be this rapper who appeared on Wild and Out, she was pretty much seen as the butt of a joke. And I remember some people saying, well, that show is about laughs and roasting each other, and she shouldn't have been in that space if she couldn't handle it. But regardless of how you felt, she was triggered. And when DC called her ugly, she almost cried if she didn't cry. And a lot of people were talking about how DC was a colorist and how a lot of these male comedians who make attacks at black women, specifically dark skinned black women, often have light skinned or non black partners. And DC does happen to be a factor of that. But either way, it was like a very big moment on the show. And also, Nick Cannon happens to be a host who, again, embodied the mockery of black women in his earlier career. And also for the longest, you'd only see him partnered up with non-black women. It just made you wonder, like, how are you depicting dark-skinned black women? And so Azealia Banks, again, would be critiqued about this because she is known for being outspoken and criticizing people. But in that moment, she was very vulnerable and cried, and a lot of people felt like that they were being colorist. So the last person I'd like to talk about is Trey Mo. Trey Mo is a comedian who he does like this, he's like a ventriloquist, and he does these skits with this black Muppet or black woman Muppet. And I would like to say that out of all of these new people who quote unquote embody black women, I feel like he's the most like unproblematic because Keisha is funny. A lot of people say, well, these characters are funny. Keisha is funny, but he's also not. He's also bringing a unique perspective where he has his talent, where he's a ventriloquist, but he also does like relationship type of videos where people can relate to. And
Babe, I'm about to go to work. Give me a kiss. So she email me over the papers. First of all, you not my boss. Second of all, we got the same job title. And third of all, get the hell up out my face because your damn breath stink. Girl, let me call you back. Trey!
Damn, Keisha, what you hit me for?
What I told you about driving my car and not putting no gas back in it.
I put $20 in the console.
Is that putting gas back in it? Is that putting gas back in it? You sitting there with that dumbass look on your face. Don't play with me. I'm not for play. Now I'm gonna be late for work because I gotta stop and put gas back in my car. Listen, the next time you drive my shit, don't put no gas back in my shit. Go be your last time driving my shit. Yeah, girl, I'm back. He keep fucking around with me. His damn calf muscles gonna be strong as hell from all that walking he gonna be doing.
I feel like Keisha does have a lot of sass, but in general, he does like show different dynamics of Keisha and a relationship that might be a bit toxic. And again, I feel like he tries to be very mature on how he portrays those messages. And so overall, I like to say that the mockery of black women has gone on for a very long time. It seems like at least for 50 years, if you think about it, because the earliest, like again, I can say Richard Pryor kind of opened that door. And then you see it with people like Red Fox, which started in the 70s, and men just kept picking it up that, oh, it's profitable to ridicule black women. And, they just decided to do it. And sometimes this doesn't give black women a good chance to be themselves, or it shows black women as a monolith. And there are ghetto sassy women of all shades and colors, quote unquote, or they're all like women who might have those characteristics. But when men just try to like show the most negative parts of a woman, it just becomes very questionable. And when they feel like to me, if you just can't be funny outside of it, like as your natural born heterosexual quote unquote self, then what are you doing with your life? And so again, that's what I wanted to bring about in this video essay, the dynamics of the mockery of black women, who contributes to it, and who holds themselves accountable, and just the dynamics of being a woman, and it's not necessarily one way. And yeah, that's kind of all I have to say. Let me know what you think in the comments, and thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.